My third topic is poetry says much in little. Robert Frost has long been considered as a poet of New England, but his reputation transcends the regional boundary. His poems look simple, direct, and natural, but Frost was almost never as simple, direct, and natural as he appeared to be. His simplicity is deceptive. His poetry almost always says much in little. Now let me read aloud for you his short poem, The Pasture, and see whether you can get a sense of the deceptive simplicity in his poetry. The pasture. I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear I may. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by the mother. It's so young it totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear I may. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by the mother. It's so young it totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come too. Frost's poetry has an earnest attitude toward the reader, a willingness to allow the reader to understand and feel what he was presenting. This quality, first and foremost, expresses itself in the plain and simple language of his poems, especially in the diction, and that he says he dropped to an everyday level of diction that even Wordsworth kept above. In other words, he was saying that his poetic diction is even simpler than William Wordsworth's. Second, in the sound of sayings, a speaking tone of voice that is as easy and spontaneous as it sounds, yet it is almost always full of artistry. Since Frost enjoys the straight crookedness of a good walking stick in his metrical design, the dramatic constructions of phrasing, intonation, and word stress always parallel the art of poetic meters and their substitutions in his poetic lines. Third, well known as a poet of nature, Frost finds in nature images of many kinds and assumes to read and analyze nature as a book. Frost's nature lyrics, therefore, enjoy a philosophical depth in which the poet digs deep beneath their seemingly simple surface. No matter how pure and simple Frost poems may appear in forms, their implicit meanings are almost always intricate. Now let me present a detailed analysis of this poem. In terms of poetic diction, Frost's preference for simple and unliterary poetic words is obvious. Out of 66 words in this poem, there are only 10 words of 2 syllables, while the others are all monosyllabic words. Significantly, in order to present a physical description of a pastoral scene, all the nouns Frost uses in this poem are physical, concrete nouns. pasture, spring, leaves, water, calf, mother, and tongue. We may notice that almost all the concrete nouns refer to pastoral features of a New England farm. Moreover, instead of emotive or evaluative adjectives, the poet only uses two purely descriptive adjectives, clear and little. Furthermore, almost all the verbs are dynamic, referring to definite physical acts: clean, stop, rake, wait, watch, fetch, and lick. As a result, Frost seems successful here in pursuing a poetic diction which is absolutely unliterary. In terms of syntax, the sentence is simple. The average sentence length is less than 10 words. The poem contains only 2 complex sentences, but even in these 2 complex sentences, we see no striking variety of complexity from one to the other. His dependent clauses do not precede the subjects of main clauses. His sentences therefore balance well and look short and simple. Thematically speaking, what is depicted in this short poem is nothing more than a simple and physical description of an invitation from a farmer poet or a poet farmer. The first line presents the background of the farm and the man who cares for it. The speaker is going forth by himself in early spring to clear a spring of water, and he says his work will be very brief. But he asks the addressee to go with him. In the second stanza, the subject switches from the spring to a little calf, which is so young that it stands tottering beside its mother. And again, the speaker asks the addressee to go with him, to fetch it. Here we can easily reconstruct the whole scene in our mind's eye. However, the 2 small quatrains show how the least may mean most, offering writer and reader alike the delight of saying an ordinary thing and discovering that it is not. On the first level, if we take the speaker I as a farmer, the whole poem will prove to be a picture of vigorous farm life in early spring. At this time of the year, farmers are making preparations for the growing season. In this case, the springtime clearing of the dead leaves left over through the winter may suggest the rhythmical continuity of life and death in nature. In the second stanza, an image of a tottering calf beside its mother symbolizes a future full of promises. On the second level, the speaker I can also be seen as a worker, a caretaker of growing things, who helps things happen. Since man's life is a limited span, so is his every action. In contrast with the eternal image of the timeless cycle of seasons and a limitless universe, each limited span of each action by man comprises in its temporality something of eternity. So the farmer's actions are only finite representations of an infinite or timeless reality, but they can be repeated year after year, one generation after another. And this is the way Frost unifies earthly limitedness with universal unlimitedness. On a third level, since Frost takes his poem as an introduction to his poetry, the speaker I can also be regarded as the poet himself, in which case the poem might seem to be a manifestation of the poet's thought about his poetics and poetry. The dead leaves he wants to rake away in the first stanza may suggest the old-fashioned versification of the 19th century with which he wants to break, while the little calf, struggling to stand by itself, symbolizes the kind of new poetry he has written. The invitation, therefore, can be seen as the poet's invitation for the reader to appreciate his poetry. The poem stands not only as an invitation to his poetic world, but also presents the figures that are central to that world. The poet, the reader, the natural setting, and the animal. In this way, Frost has very artfully drawn us into complexity. So my argument is that the simplicity in Frost's poetry is deceptive. Poetry, therefore, can be an art which says much in little.